It's one of the interesting things about photography. We often fall into this trap of thinking photographs are these immaterial things that just get reproduced on you look at it on a screen or published in a magazine. But at the end of the day, particularly for people like us who work in museums, photographs are objects that exist in spaces, and they have different scales and impressions that you can't really appreciate through reproduction. So that's just a long-winded way of me saying I really enjoy coming and seeing, even though I've helped develop this exhibition and seen it on other occasions. It's fantastic to see another iteration, and congratulations to you and the team for putting on such an elegant hang. I think that really does justice to the work. Yeah, look, as someone said, I'm from Monash Gallery of Art in Melbourne, and we're a regional gallery like this gallery, auspiced by the local council, but we have an emphasis on photography, similar to the Albury Gallery actually, although we've probably gone further down the path of just saying we only deal with photography, and our collection is all photographic material by Australians or of international photographers working in Australia. Because David Stephenson is one of the most accomplished living photographers living in Australia, really. His work's held in collections all over the world. His work has been written about very extensively. He was born in America and trained in America and came to live in Australia in his late 20s and moved to Tasmania. And I'll talk a little bit more about his early work in a second. The point I wanted to make was that this is one of the kind of shows that we do, which tries to get people to appreciate important photographic figures, and I suppose particularly with this body of work, to get people thinking about photography as an art form and not just a documentary or a recording mechanism. And clearly a lot of the work here that we're going to talk about today aspires to something closer to painting than what people would often think of as photographs. And so when we put works like this up in our gallery, we often get people from our local community coming in going, it's great to see paintings, because they get sick of us showing photographs a lot, and they don't look closely enough to recognise that they're actually photographs still, because they are approaches. These are like Rothko paintings or something, these the Horizon works. But this is a show that's been developed also working closely with the artist himself. I don't think there's any of our collection works in this show. There's a slightly different iteration that includes some of our very early and a bit rarer works by David Stephenson, which are related to these works, but they're details inside churches. But because the climate control here is amazing, it's really good, but it's not amazing. We just decided to hold back some of our rarer collection works. But so this has become an opportunity to work with the artist, to tour his work around various regional venues, and to actually look at a very particular aspect of his work, I suppose, which is this idea of transcendence. But David Stephenson, trained in America, and a training that has a very strong technical grounding in photography. Photographic training in the States and in Europe has historically been just a calibre higher than what has been available in Australia, I suppose, in terms of the rigour and depth of a training program. And a number of Australian photographers have benefited from that over the years. But David, meaning that a number of Australian photographers have gone to America and done those courses of study and then returned to Australia. But I suppose there's a few key things to know as we survey his practice across the breadth. There's a few key features. One is, as I indicated, he really knows how to use a camera, and the camera really is like it's like his palette, it's like his toolbox. He's not a click and shoot kind of photographer. He's someone who knows how to make the camera do certain things. Even if they cut against the aspiration for a very clear, accurate documentary image, he knows what a lens and a film can do with light and the different ways that those aspects can be manipulated to achieve different effects, like painterly effects, for instance. I think this is very important, particularly when we look at the star, think about the star drawings over here. His ability to actually make the camera into a toolbox that allows him to kind of draw effectively using stars is very important, really central to understanding his work. The other thing, as I indicated, is his interest in landscape, which I suppose is just his stepping stone into a broader interest in the sublime, what the sublime is. And throughout his work, whether he's photographing desert landscapes or night skies or the ceilings of churches or cities at night, his concern is really with the sublime. The sublime. What is the sublime? There's hundreds of years of discourse on this, obviously. But I suppose the notion of the sublime is essentially this encounter with greatness, something that's bigger than you are, that's very hard to understand or hard to measure. People often associate it with the landscape, looking out at an amazing sunset or at a dawn that makes you aware of the cosmos being so huge. I remember getting up in the middle of the night, I don't know, when I was a kid, to look, maybe it was Halley's Comet or something like that. We've all had these experiences where you get up and suddenly you're encountering something which just is mind-boggling. But it doesn't have to be something that's physically big. It could also be the face of a newborn baby. That there's a sublime quality to that, because you're suddenly confronted with this, there's this life that's going to unfold and you have no way of really measuring it, and you're not going to be around to see it through to its natural end, hopefully. So the sublime is really this experience of wonder at something, not necessarily wonder actually, it's just an encounter with something that's much bigger than you and that is difficult to measure or to grasp in a straightforward or easily digestible way. But you can respond to the sublime in different ways. The kind of feelings can be very different. I said wonder, but I was biasing it towards a sense of satisfied reflection, I suppose. An encounter with the sublime can also be terrifying. It can also make you feel scared. It can make you feel insignificant. But an important aspect of the sublime is this idea that I suppose this show captures with the word transcendence. There's this when you encounter, one way of encountering the sublime, one way of responding to the sublime is that you encounter something that's much bigger than you, and suddenly being aware of your own insignificance adds a certain lightness to your life. You realise that the cosmos is much bigger than you. You realise that life goes on in these beautiful children well beyond the span of your lifetime. And it's like life doesn't end when you die, or life actually isn't really interested in individual lives, in your individual life. Life is going to continue unfolding through the cosmos, through different lives, through different ages. And I suppose being able to grasp that or see that or accept that might be described as experiencing a state of transcendence, because you rise above your petty concerns or your individual hurts and pains and frustrations, and suddenly you see the bigger forces of the universe. And I think this is really what David Stephenson's engagement with the sublime is about. It's not about fear or terror or confronting people with the limits of their understanding. He feels there's a very soft kind of spiritual transcendence in these works, and I think in the later works in particular, it becomes quite playful. You get this sense of him playing with the cosmos, and I think this is where his technical investment in the camera and the way he uses it as this little tool is really interesting for me, because it's like he lets the camera dance with these forces that are much bigger than him and the camera. And he just harnesses them in beautifully playful ways. And I often get the sense that his camera is that he's putting the camera out into the landscape to kind of experience the sublime and to dance with the sublime and just give us a way of transcending the specific and enjoying the infinite or the absolute, as he calls it. Which refers back to a very early way of conceptualising the camera as a drawing instrument. Some of the early writing and photography talked about it being nature's way of writing or drawing itself, because the light of nature just kind of captured their kind of drawing of the world. And he's followed through with that idea that the camera might kind of draw from nature, if you like. But what he's done is, with these works, is that they're nighttime skies, and he's pointed the camera up into the sky on a tripod. And he does, if you leave as we all know, if you leave the lens open, then you get a streak of light across the sky. So he's left it open in some of these for, say, 10 minutes, then closed it for 15, then opened it for 10, closed it for 15, opened it for 10. So you get these dotted arcs running through them. But then also, after doing that, you might then turn the camera around on its tripod, so you're getting a different axis. So all these explorations that are following a kind of thing this way might then start going that way. And so the camera effectively is kind of dancing with all this information that's coming from space, and it's really intriguing information when you start to think about it, and making these really beautiful little decorative pattern drawings of what's going on up there in the sky. And when I mean the information coming from the sky is really kind of amazing. We all know that what we're looking at when we look at a star, it could be billions of years old. We're looking at light travelling through space. So really, we're looking at this, what's the word, a kind of condensed kaleidoscope of effects. But really, this point of light and this point of light might not even exist at the same time anymore. One might be dead, one might continue living, and all these beams of light are travelling totally different periods of space and time. So it really is like confetti up there of information, and he kind of just captures it and renders it as these beautiful little decorative drawings. And the other thing in relation to that is that the colours that you see here in the stars is something that you don't perceive with the naked eye, really. Sometimes you might think, there's kind of a pinkiness there, but really we just see the light. But one of the things that the camera can do is that it allows you to see things that you can't really see with your naked eye. And this is true of these cupolas, or these the vaults, the domes. Any of you who've been through Europe and looked at basilicas and cathedrals will know that when you walk into those spaces, they're normally very dark and dim. It's like walking into a wine cellar or something. It's very hard to. You would never see this level of detail and colour. This is like, it's like a cellar. But when he puts the camera underneath those domes and is using long exposures of these works as well, it draws all of that colour and detail out. So you use, this is something that photographers have always been interested in, is the camera as a technical device that allows you to see things that you can't otherwise see. And certainly in relation to space, the camera's had a huge impact on the development of our knowledge about the moon, about the cosmos, because you're able to set up a camera and take a long exposure of the moon, and you'd just be able to see a lot more information than you would just by looking at it through a telescope. Just the long exposure captures so much more detail and allows you often to see it, compare it over a period of time as well. His ability to work across very different subject matter and continue exploring this idea of the sublime, of the absolute and the infinite, is remarkable. Cosmopolitan, contemporary cosmopolitan cities like these ones, and ancient Renaissance medieval architecture, to just pure kind of desert landscapes and starscapes. And I think there's a real potency through all those the way he treats those different types of subject matter. My colleague Stella Loftus Hills, who was really the curator of his show, I just oversaw it. but I think she did really well to focus on this idea of the transcendence. It's not just about the sublime, it's about a particular relationship with the sublime, which is about, rising above individuality, being dispersed or absorbed into a bigger cosmos.